The objective of the grade calculation is to convert the numeric weighted average score into a corresponding letter grade. So we need to define a function that will perform this calculation. And let's make reference to our handy dandy reference guide, the sample spreadsheet that I provided in this project. Again, if you look in the reference section, note that I have a rubric here for translating weighted averages into grades, and this is fairly standard. Note that if the score is greater than an 89, we assign a letter grade of A, and we exit from the calculation. If it's bigger than a 79, well, we've excluded the A, so it has to be a B, and we exit the calculation. If it's greater than a 69, then we assign a C. If it's bigger than 59, we assign a D. And if none of those four criteria, those prior criteria, are satisfied, well, then the default grade is obviously an F. Now, to understand the grade function, you need to know that we're using a conditional statement. It's called an if statement. And the way you read this is from left to right, you interpret the first comma within this statement as then, and the second in sequence as otherwise. So, for example, if you look at the example I have for N6, we would read this if M6, M as in M&M, which is the corresponding weighted average for Bob. If Bob's weighted average is bigger than 89, we'll give him an A. Otherwise, if it's bigger than 79, we'll give him a B. Otherwise, if it's bigger than 69, we'll assign him a C. Otherwise, if it's bigger than 59, we'll give him a D. Otherwise, we'll just give him an F. Now note for that last condition, you don't really need an if condition test because obviously if none of the prior criteria have been satisfied, the default label of F applies. So let's build this out. I'll move the reference guide over to my other screen. And I'm also going to scroll a little bit to the right here just to open up a little bit more viewing space so you can watch the build out on this formula. In fact, let's just isolate the weighted average calculation. Remember, we always start with the example entry in the first row of a table and then generalize downwards. So here's how it works. We hit the equal sign to indicate we're entering a function. If, and you'll note we're also getting code hinting here. I haven't mentioned this before, but you note that when you begin entering in a function, you'll get suggestions for the syntax of that statement in this little flyout. So we'll read this as if test. Of course, we're testing to see if a particular score is greater than a certain threshold level. So if the weighted average is bigger than an 89, then we'll assign an A, that's the then value, comma, otherwise we'll do another if test. So clicking into this, if left parenthesis, and I'll just click on cell M6 to generate that coordinate. If M6 is greater than an 89, then, and that's how you read that first comma, assign a letter grade of A. And you have to put the letter grade assignment within double quotes. Otherwise, and remember that you always read that second comma as otherwise or else, if, in parentheses, M6, and I'll just type it here, is greater than 79, then assign a B, else if, in parentheses, M6 is greater than 69, then assign a letter grade of C, else if M6 is bigger than 59, then assign a D. Otherwise, or else, well, the only thing left is to assign an F. And then we need to close out the open parentheses. So I see that there's one, 2, 3, 4 open left parentheses. So I'm going to need 4, 1, 2, 3, 4 corresponding right parentheses to close out the calculation. Let's hit enter, and that'll register the corresponding letter grade. So 64 is in the range of a D. And by the way, you could add other intermediate ranges for plus or minus grades, but we won't bother with that here. And then clicking back on the example entry and mousing over the grab box, let's drag down to apply this computation to subsequent rows. And then you'll also note that all of these formulas are relative to, in the first row, are relative to row 6. But if you click on the corresponding cell entry, note that it's been updated to M7, M8, and M9. Now this works for 4 grades, it'll work for 40 grades, it'll work for 400 or 4,000. That's the beauty of spreadsheets, that you do that one example calculation, and then you can apply that calculation to the remaining students in the class.